everybody. Once again, this is Fred Wanko coming to you from our studios in Chicago with another edition of Bull Talk on Island TV. And as usual, I'd like to say good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you, depending on where you are around the world. In this episode, I just can't help myself because sometimes, especially in the Nigeria we live in today, knowing what happened from 1967 till the explosion of social media, I've come to realize that anytime the divide and conquer group in Nigeria, be them Igbos or Yorubas or Fulanis or Hausas or anybody, anytime they come out with their divide and conquer distortion about the history of Nigeria, everybody who has the facts need to go crazy with it on social media and straighten them out, because the reason Nigeria has deteriorated to where it is today is that from 1967 till the last few years, lies were repeated on mainstream media that was controlled by the divide and conquer group in Nigeria. And after so many years of those lies, you start believing them as truth. In Igbo, we say, that's what has happened. And in this episode, there is a cabal-pocketed Igbo man, Dr. Paul Okoye, who came out with a video about what led to the Civil War and how the coup happened and who was involved in the coup. This has to be disputed. And I don't want you to dispute it because I said so and believe me. I want you to go and do your own research and dig out what the facts are. And the question is for Dr. Okoye, how much were you paid? These are the things that come out, and the bigots in Nigeria and the divide and conquer group and their media will come out and present it as, oh, but you know, we didn't say it. It's an Igbo man saying it. He starts out talking about, in his own from his own perspective, the representation of Igbos in the civil service before the war.
I didn't, because up to 67% of the civil servants were Igbos. Up to 70% of the railway workers were Igbos. Up to 60% of the director generals in Nigeria were Igbos. All the director generals in Nigeria were Igbos. 40 senior military officers were Igbos. All the key and important positions in Nigeria were Igbos. So what happened? The president of Nigeria was an Igbo man.
Great. So right there is point number one where you should question. If Igbos were well placed in all these positions, and I haven't heard one single person, even within the cabal and the bigots, who have said that Igbos were nepotistically placed in these positions that they did not qualify for. Igbos were placed in all these high positions in Nigeria, which they qualified for, which probably, because I don't like being arrogant, it's not about who is better. Nobody in Nigeria is better than anybody. Nobody in Nigeria is more educated than anybody. Education runs in all segments of Nigeria. But going back to the 60s, they were as qualified as anybody, if not more qualified, to be placed in the positions they were holding. So if Igbos were placed in all those high positions, what was there for Igbos to gain in selfishly planning a coup? I didn't say Igbos were not involved in the coup. They were involved in the coup. But Igbos were not the only ones in the coup, as Dr. Okoye single story lied based on what he was paid to do by a cabal. Major Banjo was involved in that coup. Atonkbera a former military governor of East Central State from Benue State, was involved in that coup. And Adewale Ademoyega, a Yoruba person, was involved in that coup. Doesn't logic say that if Igbos had more military officers in the army and the army was planning a coup, and the more higher placed officers in the army were Igbos, in a system worldwide where authority goes from top to bottom, doesn't logic say that most people involved in that coup, since there were more Igbo army officers, will be Igbos? That's number one. Doesn't logic also say that very likely the leader of that coup is going to be Igbo? That's logic. Until you bring tribalism into it to achieve a perspective that is predetermined by bigots in Nigeria. Okay, here is the lying, fabricating Dr. Paul Okoye continuing his single story.
I've explained this before, and then let me touch it again. I say there is nothing like a ceremonial president. The president is always and always the first citizen of every nation. Like we go to the UK, we have the Queen. The Queen is the first citizen. So the Queen is the number one person in UK. You cannot expect the Prime Minister to go and or the Queen to go and take salute from the Prime Minister. But the Prime Minister go and take the salute from the Queen. Actually, it's the Queen that swear him into power. So she could not have accepted the post of the Prime Minister when he is the foremost Nigerian, the first Governor General of Nigeria. It's not possible. So he was the president because in a parliamentary system of government, the president is the number one and is head of the judiciary, while the prime minister is prima facie as the first among the ministers, but the president remains the president. So I know for a long time, people have said, pass on this negative information that Abubakar Tafoda was in charge because Zik was a ceremonial president. There is nothing called ceremonial president. The world we live today, there are still countries that practice parliamentary system of government. The form of government we practice them was a parliamentary system of government, and the president as always is the head of the government.
Folks, I'm so happy that in 2023, the world is starting to recognize that as beautiful as it is to be educated, get master's degrees and PhDs and everything beyond them, the world also has come to realize that there are a lot of ignorant PhDs. Dr. Paul Okoye is one of those ignorant PhDs. How can an idiot like this equate a president and prime minister in a parliamentary system where the president is ceremonial and the prime minister is the executive person in charge of government? How can this idiot equate that system in Nigeria to the system, the royal system in England, where the Queen is actually the person who the Prime Minister gets approval from before they do quite a few things? That was not the system in Nigeria. That was not what was going on in Nigeria in 1960. And this idiot called Dr. Paul Okoye knows that. But all he's concerned about here, just like the Supreme Court justices and the appeals court justices that declared Bola Ahmed Tinubu the president, all they are concerned about is not facts. All they are concerned about is Chekem has the money allotted them, that the money is in their account. It's shameful. It's disgraceful. I don't know what town this man is from. I'd like to find out so I could go talk to people in his town and see how they regard him. Because I know that idiots like this, even in their own hometown, are not regarded. because they are seen as wishy-washy, bribable people. Let's continue.
Now, when we got power or when we had our independence, now I've said already, somehow, for no reason, or at least a reason I cannot comprehend, your brother, who is my brother, an Igbo man from Onitsha, decided to organize a coup. And that person that organized the coup is Emmanuel Efad. And the president of Nigeria is Nnamdi Azikiwe, the wall of Onitsha. So we had an Onitsha man that organized the coup against an Onitsha man. This is the truth of the matter. Now, there are so many stupid things that have been said about this coup. But the truth about it is that the people that organized the coup were Igbos. Sometimes they tell you that they wanted to organize the coup well after the coup to bring in our war to come and rule. Oh well, we don't know. We didn't hear that officially. That is speculation because you don't tell me that somebody will go and lay down his life to go and bring another person to come and rule. But let us presume that that's what he intended to do. There's no fact to substantiate or support that. It's a speculation. What we do know is that Igbos organize a coup. Let us be very frank about it.
Again, ignorance is compounding more ignorance. Did you hear what he said? That what they said was that they organized the coup so they can enthrone Chief Obafemi Awolowo. We've all heard that. It may be true, it may not be true. But what he said is that that's an assumption that we'll never find out. That much is true. What he said there is true. So, on the facts of the matter that suggest that Igbos were not planning a coup selfishly to enthrone an Igbo, he did not say the coup was planned to remove Tafawa Balewa and enthrone Nnamdi Azikiwe. He did not say that the coup was planned to remove Tafawa Balewa and enthrone any Igbo person. What he said was that they claimed the coup was planned to enthrone Obafemi Awolowo. And he said, we can never find out if that's true. That's a fact. But now let's go back to the other things he said about the reasons why the coup was planned and why it was an Igbo coup. Where are his facts for those? So there's the benefit of the doubt that we cannot prove if they were having the coup to enthrone Awolowo. Why is he so categorically vehement about the fact, all the lies he told about why the coup was planned by Igbo army officers? And why did he deliberately not mention the army officer Adewale Ademoyega and barely mentioned Banjo and made it seem like Banjo was irrelevant in the coup and did not mention Atonkbera? And there are other people, because I know I've seen, I just couldn't dig them up today. I've also seen that there were one or two soldiers from the Middle Belt and even one Fulani that was involved in that coup. The bottom line is that that coup was a result of the unrest that was going on in Western Nigeria. That much we know. But my real point here is not to dig up who is right or wrong on that coup. What I'm saying is, why can't we just get along for God's sake? Why do we have to dig up all these lies and distorted stories that divide us and rev up sentiments of tribalism instead of stressing all the beautiful things that unite Nigerians that can help us heal and move forward? Let's continue listening to the doctor of distortion.
Because part of the things we are not honest with is that we don't want to accept this obvious fact that Igbos organized a coup. Because the person that initiated the coup was Emmanuel Efad with Onwa Tuegu. Soro was brought in by Soro, who is very good friend. Except for the Major Banjo that joined them, the rest were Igbos.
Let the record show, and you could do your own research. The rest were not Igbos. There were Yorubas involved in the coup. I could mention two of them, Adewale Ademoyega and Major Banjo. There were Middle Belters involved in the coup. I can mention one of them, Atonkwera. There were Fulanis involved in the coup, and there were people from other tribes involved in the coup. But that's irrelevant again. I don't give a rat's ass who was involved in that coup. That coup happened in 1966, and Nigeria has bled enough since 1966. When are we going to leave the... Zeke has been dead and gone a long time. Awolowo has been dead and gone a long time. Amadu Bello, Tafawa Balewa. The problems in Nigeria today were not caused by the coup in 1966. The problem and agitations in Nigeria today were caused by the deprivation that's been going on against certain segments of Nigeria since 1966, and it's deliberate, and it's run by a cabal that is mainly Fulani, but has money-pocketed people from Igbo, Yoruba, Hausa, Edo, and that's the bane of our problem today in Nigeria. That's what Dr. Paul Okoye needs to be talking about, not his garbage from the Dele Alake and Bayo Ononuga School of Journalism Distortion.
Now, let us leave the people that organized the coup, because I've told you that the coup was initiated by Emmanuel Efajuna and no other person. No other person. Now, how was this coup executed? The execution proper. Our fallout was that 27 Northerners were killed. 27. And out of that 27, every important military officer from the North died.
Every important military officer from the North died. But Hassan Katsina lived. Muritala Mohammed lived. Yakubu Gowon lived. All these soldiers that have been running Nigeria since 1970 from the North, they all lived. Danjuma and all of them. I'm not trying to be prejudiced here. I'm just trying to face facts. When you come out to tell stories, have your facts right. And another thing that's significant to show you that even after that coup, Nigeria still had a semblance of people working towards one Nigeria. Obafemi Awolowo was locked away in a jail in Calabar, not by an Igbo person. He was locked away by Tafawa Balewa, the Tafawa Balewa government, not the Nnamdi Azikiwe government. The Iran see who is the bane of this man's problem outside issues outside Zeke was in Ibadan with a good friend of his, Brigadier Fajui. Ojukwu, who was in charge of the East at the time Awolowo was in jail in Calabar, protected Awolowo like an egg to make sure that egg did not break. I wonder why Ojukwu did not connive to poison Awolowo in jail. He protected them. Awolowo went back to Nigeria from Biafra, not from Nigeria. Awolowo went back to Nigeria from the jail in Calabar that was now part of Biafra. Ojukwu handed Awolowo back to Nigeria where he wanted to go. Fajuyi refused to let them take away Aguiyi Ironsi from his house because he told them that Aguiyi-Ironsi had nothing to do with the first coup or the second coup. I bring these facts to say that even with the divide and conquer preaching for Igbos and Yorubas to now kill themselves and all that, all these things are not necessary. Idiots like Paul Okoye are hired for a reason. Because if these stories are told by a Fulani man or an Hausa man or a Yoruba man, it will be written off as prejudice against Igbos. So it's convenient for them to bring an Igbo pocketed idiot to tell a stupid story. So the story could be sold as, listen to him now. It wasn't a Yoruba man saying it. It wasn't a Fulani. It was an Igbo man. It's an Igbo man who knows the facts. It's shameful, it's disgraceful, and it's not going to happen as long as we have credible social media. We're here for them, and we're going to keep bringing facts to dispute their garbage.
Now, if you want to organize a coup, the very first person you kill is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The commander-in-chief of that armed forces was Nnamdi Azikiwe. He was not killed. Yes, he was outside Nigeria. But who told me that he was not informed there was going to be a coup to travel outside Nigeria? But let us assume that it was a coincidence. Under the system of government that we operate in, when he travels, power goes to the Senate President. The Senate President then was Nwafori. So Kwesi was aware. The President of Nigeria was the Senate President, who is an Igbo man, who was Nwafori. Nwafori was not killed. Now, you cannot organize a coup without killing the most important military officer. The most important military officer, who is the chief of staff, was Umunakwa Aguiyi-Ironsi, who is an Igbo man. Umunakwa Aguiyi-Ironsi was not killed. Now, Ojukwu was in Kanu, in charge of the Artillery Brigade. Ojukwu was a lieutenant colonel then, a very senior officer. Ojukwu himself was not killed, but every officer from the north was killed.
Folks, I hope I don't start sounding like a broken record. But is there a single Nigerian old enough to understand what happened in 1966 that really believes that Nnamdi Azikiwe was the commander-in-chief of the Nigerian armed forces beyond ceremonially, and that the Nigerian armed forces took orders from Nnamdi Azikiwe and not from Tafawa Balewa? Is there a single living person that believes that? And let's assume they did. Is there a single living person that believed that when Nnamdi Azikiwe leaves Nigeria, that the power of execution of authority in Nigeria bypasses Tafawa Balewa and goes and goes to Nwafori, the Senate President? If Dr. Paul Okoye wants to lie, which is fine, people lie every day, doesn't it make sense to lie credibly and pretend that you even make sense? How ignorantly can people lie? This is sickening. Absolutely sickening. And it brings me to something else that must be said. I too believe that it was really, really wrong and slow thinking on Aguiyi-Ironsi's position, taking over power, not to immediately round up the officers who planned the coup and contain them in a place where they ultimately needed to be tried and face the consequences of planning a coup. That did not happen. But when that did not happen, let me equate Aguiyi-Ironsi to Bola Ahmed Tinubu today. is it fair to Yorubas, or let me equate Aguiyi-Ironsi, Ifeajuna, Nzogwu, and everybody involved from January 66 to July 66 and the crisis? Is it fair to say that Bola Ahmed Tinubu today and the democratic coup he planned to steal the election and get sworn in as president, is it fair to Yorubas to blame Yorubas for what Bola Ahmed Tinubu did and the lies he told, when we know authoritatively that there are the daily Farotimis, the daily Momodus, the Pade Banjos, the Bode Georges, the slew of progressive Yorubas who are involved in the obedient movement to stop Bola Ahmed Tinubu's lies and steal? Is it fair to say that Yorubas should be held accountable for the dirt that Bola Ahmed Tinubu represents? And if the answer is no, is it fair to hold Igbos accountable for every decision that Aguiyi-Ironsi made and every decision that Nzogwu made and Ifeajuna and on? Is it fair to hold every suffering Fulani man today accountable for the compounded wrong and prejudiced decisions that the Fulani cabal has been making since 1967 in Nigeria? My point is this: the average Nigerian has nothing to do and has benefited nothing from the mistakes that people from their tribe may have made that contributed to certain problems in Nigeria. The only reason we reason that way is that we're tribalistically poisoned, and the divide and conquer agents will continue to poison our minds, so that instead of focusing on the beautiful things that unite us as Nigerians, we'll rather be brainwashed into what the cabal and the different divide and conquer agents across Nigeria, Igbos, Yorubas, and Hausas, want us to be thinking like. And it's time to get away from that state of mind.
Now, there are other killings I cannot understand. Killing the Sultan of Sokoto. Sultan of Sokoto is a civilian. It's like you organize a coup and go and kill governor of Abia State, or you go and kill governor of Sokoto State. What does somebody who is the governor of the Northern Region have to do with the killing or organize the coup? Arrest him and put him in a prison. But you did not kill only Sultan of Sokoto. You killed the Sultan and killed the Ahmadu Bello. You killed the Sadwana and killed the wife. You killed the wife and shot the wife in the stomach to kill the child, to kill the unborn baby. You killed the two of the secretaries. So I cannot understand these killings. And if we want to be honest with it, we have to be honest to the point, to the fact that this killing was premeditated. Let us assume it's a coincidence too, because Zeke traveling outside is a coincidence. Let us say this killing is still a coincidence. Now, after killing these northern people, ndị Igbo form egwu n'ugwu Hausa and started mocking the Hausa. Ewu n'ebe akwa alalụma, ewu n'ebe. That was the music that we used in mocking these people.
Let's go step by step. Let me start out by saying how bad I too feel that the wife of the Sardauna, who was not a politician herself, was killed, or that the unborn child was killed. Soldiers can be reckless in the way they do things, just like there are reckless things that soldiers under Muritala Mohammed did to Igbos in Asaba. And we'll get to that. That's a different story. and Dr. Paul Okoye, in his brilliant representation of the cabal that sent him, said nothing about the Asaba massacre. But I too feel bad about that killing of that woman. In retrospect, I feel bad about any killings that happened in 1967. But with that said, let's get to the music he just talked about. On a daily basis, including today, young people are singing songs, and some of those songs are ignorant. The people involved in making that song, I've seen videos where they said their song had nothing to do with mocking the massacre, the killing of Fulani army officers. But let's assume it did. How many Igbos were consulted by the band who made that song? Did Igbos get together and say, let's sing a song and mock the killing of Hausas? My point is this. A lot of stupid things happen in a country of 200 million people. When are we going to stop attributing everything done by Tunde to be something done by Yorubas, and everything done by Mohammed to be something done by Hausas and Fulanis, and everything done by Okechukwu to be something done by Igbos? And we call ourselves educated. And this video is produced by a man who, in his own words, you're going to hear along the line, how he's an expert in XYZ. I call Dr. Okoye an expert in ignorance.
This was what led them to mutiny. They got angry and rebelled and started the killing. Now, other things that happened. I want somebody listening to me to explain to me if in the history of mankind such a thing has ever happened. Umunakwa did not organize coup. The Senate president, who was not for it, put a call across to Namdaskiwe that he wants to hand over power to Umunakwa Aguironsi. Umunakwa Aguironsi called one for issue, and they reached an understanding to meet. They organized a press conference. The president of Nigeria, who was the president of Soro, who was standing brief for this, handed over power to Johnson Umunakwa Aguironsi. I want somebody to tell me, where on earth do you see somebody assuming power without any form of administrative function, without any form of procedure? Somebody calling for us and give you power. Let us assume that this is a coincidence. Umunakwe became president of Nigeria and they formed the unitary government. Because some of the times we don't want to tell ourselves is that we, the Igbos, had a greater blame in the situation Nigeria finds itself today. That is why we are calling this conference. Because there are certain things we have to do. We have to heal the land and stop this semanticism and madness that people are going around carrying propaganda, telling lies for their personal and selfish aggrandizement.
Okay, so Dr. Paul Okoye conveniently said that he doesn't believe that the coup was organized to enthrone Chief Obafemi Awolowo. He doesn't believe that. But he completely believes the sequence of calls that happened from Zeke to Nwafo Rizu to enthrone Aguiyi-Ironsi. And for him, that part is fact. But the part he doesn't like is speculative. Let's address the issue of Nwafo Rizu handing power over to Aguiyi-Ironsi. Two things to look at there. A bunch of radical soldiers just took over power, killed army officers in the north, took over power, killed some civilians, and some civilians are tiptoeing, scared what's going to happen to them. I mean, civilian politicians. Is it far-fetched to assume that all Nwafo Rizu was doing was to hand over power and get the hell out of Dodge. That's one part. And secondly, is the coincidence of handing over power to Aguiyi-Ironsi by virtue of the fact that he, Nwafo Rees, was handing over power to the highest ranking army officer in Nigeria, who happens to be Igbo. I'm not saying that's the fact. I'm just intelligently assuming what happened. But for bigots in Nigeria, the convenient way to look at it is that Igbos organized a coup and Igbos handed over power to Aguiyi-Ironsi, who is an Igbo man. And in fairness to other Nigerians, yes, it's not a wrong way to suspect that things happened. But it comes a time where common sense should take over and sentiments need to be put in the back burner. When are we going to decide that it's time to leave the past alone and move on forward? And when are ignorant idiots like Dr. Okoye going to understand that Nigerians understand what happens when money changes hands and people are willing to come and talk nonsense just for a payday?
Now, when Umo became the president of Nigeria for the unitary government, remember that before the coming of Umo Nigeria had a confederate status, which is what we are asking for today. Nigeria was a confederation. The North were in the North, the South were in the South, the Southeast were Southeast. That is how Nigeria was divided. There was nothing like unitary government. Power was not concentrated at the center. Everybody, the Southeast was in charge up to River State. That is the structure of Nigeria. Our own brother, who's my brother, who is your brother, Johnson Umonakwa Aguiyi-Ironsi, pulled down this confederate status that was existing in Nigeria. Somebody who is still alive, Professor Ben Nwabeze. He called Professor Ben Nwabeze. Ben Nwabeze wrote the constitution, unitary constitution, and Umonakwa Aguiyi-Ironsi took the constitution that Ben Nwabeze gave him and applied for Nigeria. But some people who are telling me today that the constitution we have is 1999 constitution, the people did not approve, the people will not talk. I want somebody to tell me where on earth you know before you get a constitution, people, I speak as an authority in certain field.
Folks, I cry for Nigeria. For money, Nigerians, be them Igbo or Yoruba or Fulani or Hausa or Edo or Ibibio, for money, Nigerians would do anything and say anything. Unfortunately, I'm one of those Nigerians who can be very, very wealthy, stinkingly wealthy, if what drives me is money. Because I don't want to brag, but I know one thing. I can be very eloquent when I talk, and I can also be very convincing when I articulate these lies. But I refuse to. I stay here on Bold Talk on Allen TV, pursuing the truth about Nigeria and hoping that someday my pursuit of the truth about Nigeria will result in a Nigeria that is fair to everybody, fair to every Nigerian. This constitution that this man said Professor Nwabeze wrote and handed over to Aguiyi-Ironsi, and how can one person write something and give to her? This thing was written by Professor Nwabeze and Chief Rotimi Williams. And at the time, it was the best document they could come up with to bridge the situation from this military government to return to a civilian government. And the question that I asked Dr. Paul Okoye and the cabal that sent him to make this video is Ironsi has been dead for over 50 years. If Nigerians are honest to themselves, cabal government after cabal government after cabal government, starting with Yakubu Gowon, until this day, Bola Ahmed Tinubu has the authority, if he's honest to himself and honest to Nigerians, to call a conference of Nigerians with representation from every segment of Nigeria to sit down together and put a document together that will put away this constitution that runs a unitary system that concentrates power in the center, a center that today benefits Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Why didn't Dr. Paul Okoye, in his eloquence, also include that Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the cabal that is paying him to run his mouth? Why couldn't he advise them on the right thing to do for Nigeria, which is to put away that unitary document that he claims Dr. Nwabeze wrote for Ironsi? Since Dr. Nwabeze has no power today and Ironsi is dead, why didn't Paul Okoye advise Bola Ahmed Tinubu to do away with that constitution and call a national conference to fix the problems in that unitary constitution? Because Dr. Paul Okoye is not being truthful to himself, and every person who sees beauty in that garbage called a video that Dr. Paul Okoye put out is also not being truthful to themselves. When Nigerians decide to be truthful to themselves, we'll stop dwelling in the mistakes of Ifajuna and Onzogu and Ironsi and come out and do a proper tribute to every person who died in that 1966 coup, and then move on to build a country where we can all move forward united and stop the stupid finger pointing. Igbos did this, Yorubas did this, Fulani did this. I'm sick of who did what. It's time to move on. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, this is Fred Nwanko coming to you from our studios in Chicago with another edition of Bull Talk on Allen TV. And until next time, good night and God bless.
Ndababa
Aije kelende mwegu
Ndababa Ndababa
Ndekraka bonki yeye
Ndekaraka Anajari shugomuno tulaji
Owe hura sano
Ndababa
anyị je kele ndị nwe egwu
Ndababa Ndababa
ndị kara aka mọnkiri ya eye
Nde karaka Anajari shugwa muno